Chapter 2. Immediately upon exiting the cave, I found myself standing at the entrance, knowing that the trio of adventurers wouldn't explore it for another 3 months, and it would be a full year before Shizu-san arrived. I had plenty of time to prepare, even though it felt a little early for my encounter with the goblin village. Nevertheless, I decided to replicate as much of it as I could. The first thing that struck me was how Veldora's presence had completely vanished. Amazing. Even from the entrance, I couldn't feel his aura at all. Seal-sensei's technological prowess was in a league of its own, but I couldn't dwell on it too long. Everyone already knew how impressive Seal was. I had to move forward and focus on Rigur's team, or rather, the nameless goblin he was at this point. It was essential to show them my slime form rather than my human form. After all, I wanted to be classified as a slime from the beginning. I asked Seal to leak the same amount and quality of aura I emitted back in the day, which should prompt the goblins to seek my protection, and just like that, the foundation for the Jura Tempest Federation would be laid. Sometimes I amazed even myself. After wandering the forest for 2 weeks, I finally sensed the goblin village. Acting as if I had accidentally stumbled upon them, I noticed a group of grim-faced goblins approaching. Despite their fierce appearance, they were visibly shaking as they drew nearer. Their weapons, rusted and cracked along the blades, seemed as worn and battered as the goblins themselves. Are they sure about this? I wondered to myself. What seemed like a trivial encounter to me was clearly a matter of life and death for them. Rigur, the goblin who stepped forward to face me, was trembling with fear but struggled to keep his composure. "Gra, strong one, do you have business here?" Rigur asked, trying to sound brave while surrounded by his comrades, who shakily brandished their weapons. "Good to meet you, I guess. My name is Rimuru. I'm a slime," I introduced myself, nonchalantly. They quickly tossed away their weapons, deciding that I was far too powerful to challenge. "Strong one, please, come to our village," one goblin stammered, mustering his courage despite the evident fear in his voice. "I see, then take me to your village," I replied, much to their surprise. They hadn't expected me to accept so readily. Their faces were painted with a clear expression of, what? Clearly, the village was a bit run down. Actually, it was practically falling apart, but they guided me to their most stable building. Rigur, along with the rest of the goblins, escorted me, though I could still sense their wariness toward me. If I turned out to be an enemy, it would mean their demise, but if they succeeded in persuading me, the benefits would be unimaginable. Given that the village was on the brink of annihilation by the direwolves, it made sense for them to take such a risk. The village was pitiful, and I couldn't help but feel sorry for the goblins. Even the most dirtiest of slums on Earth couldn't even hold a candle on this one. They lacked even the basics: food, water, shelter, and clothing. Yet, they treated me with the utmost respect and hospitality. Because of that, I made up my mind. Just as I had planned, we'll turn this slum into a mighty nation. Fu. The elder of the village soon greeted me, accompanied by Rigur. "I apologize for keeping you waiting, honored guest," the elder began, offering me a cup of tea as a gesture of respect. "I am the elder of this village," he said, introducing himself. I glanced at the tea, noting that, at the very least, they had managed to provide a decent drink. As I spoke with the elder, I noticed goblins peeking through the entrance, there. Curious faces gathering at the doorway. That's when I observed something fascinating. Was it just me, or was their population larger than I had anticipated? "Due to your early arrival, there have been fewer casualties. The battle with the direwolves has yet to begin," Seal explained. "So, because I arrived earlier than planned, I saved the lives of the goblins who would have otherwise perished?" I asked, confirming my suspicions. "That is correct. That worked out well for me. Though there had already been a few invasion attempts, the village had suffered fewer losses than in the original timeline. This larger population would be helpful for developing the village faster." The elder explained their plight. The disappearance of their deity, Veldora, had thrown the forest into chaos, with stronger races now threatening domination. They, the more powerless races, the goblins, are challenged with the attempts of stronger races wanting to devour them. Particularly, direwolves are attacking them frequently every encounter. They also asked if I would be willing to help them. Not wanting to drag the conversation out, I quickly replied, "I'm fine with helping, but I'd like to be the leader of this village." Rigur, along with his son Rigur, both knelt before me and responded. "If you mean allegiance, then we will immediately serve under your command." Well, that was easy. In exchange for my protection, they swore loyalty to me. It was exactly what I wanted. He told me the tragic story of his first son, the other Rimuru, the only named goblin who had died in the encounter with the direwolves. As the elder recounted this story, tears streamed down his face, and he begged me for protection. When he asked me for help, I knew what I had to do. Although the other Rimuru had perished in that encounter, Rimuru shared that his son had sacrificed himself to prevent the destruction of their village, saving 5 young goblins who still had bright futures ahead. I may not have met him or saved him, but he bought me the time I needed to protect them. Yes, aside from Rimuru's goblin village had suffered no casualties. The next day, I met up with the population of the goblin village. All of them are lined up in the outside premises. When all of them are already ready, I began my speech. Everyone, do you understand the gravity of our situation? I asked, addressing the gathered goblins. Yes, we are ready to fight a battle of life and death. One goblin declared, though his bruised body and tattered clothing made his words sound more pitiful than heroic. I hope to find some warriors among them, especially since their numbers had increased since last time. However, all I saw were scrawny figures, barely able to stand. There wasn't a single warrior among them. I couldn't just leave them like that. So, I decided that some improvements needed to be made. There was one specific hut that housed all the injured soldiers. When I entered, I found 10 wounded goblins. Some of their conditions were critical, especially considering their frail figures. I gobbled each of them up and poured a full potion into them. The elder who accompanied me looked worried at first, but he let out a big sigh of relief as I healed them one by one. As they recognized their recovery, they muttered, "Well, this is fantastic, Lord Rimuru," though there was a hint in his voice that he couldn't fully comprehend what had happened. Now that everyone was in top shape, the village began preparations for the upcoming battle against the direwolves. The elder granted me permission to govern their population, and I wasted no time in taking action. I command the patrol crew to scout the area around the village. Right now, the best plan is to consolidate our forces by bringing as many goblin villages together as possible. Safety in numbers is our top priority, I instructed. As expected, more goblin villages began migrating toward ours, though not without a cost. There had already been casualties, particularly in villages on the eastern edge of the forest, where the direwolves had first made their assault. The rumors of our village uniting many goblin tribes spread like wildfire, quickly reaching distant settlements. With more villages now converging here, the direwolves were running out of prey. Their next logical target would be this village. Our numbers had increased to at least 210. That was a significant improvement. With this many goblins, we might stand a decent chance against the direwolves. Still, I couldn't afford to be overly optimistic. However, I can't guarantee we'll come through unscathed. We've managed to craft some basic weapons, spears, clubs, and rudimentary shields, and we've strengthened the defenses around the village. Despite our best efforts, I knew the upcoming battle would be a true test. The direwolves were moving swiftly, and the goblins' survival would depend on how well they could fight together, fortified by the meager resources we had scraped together. 4 weeks of tireless preparation flew by as dusk fell, and the looming night promised bloodshed for the goblin village. The howls of the direwolves pierced the air, a chilling omen of the carnage about to unfold. "We have nothing to fear. Finally, we'll destroy that goblin village, and create the foothold to the great Jura forest," the direwolf alpha commanded. The whole pack howled harmoniously, showcasing their synchronization and teamwork. Leading his pack with pride, they prowled from village to village until they reached the goblin settlement they had been tracking. From a distance they saw the village, surrounded by wooden barricades. Yet, the alpha was unfazed. Confident in their raw power, the direwolves believed that the nameless goblins would be no match for their ruthless might. With a signal from the alpha, the pack launched their attack, hunger driving their every movement. But what awaited them was not a defenseless village. The goblins had been preparing for weeks. Armed with makeshift weapons and strategy, they stood ready to intercept the assault. Even so, the direwolves were undeterred. In their eyes, this was still a battle they could not lose. At the entrance to the village stood a lone figure, a translucent slime, its form glowing faintly in the dim light. "Stop right there," the slime commanded, its voice carrying a calm yet commanding tone. The alpha, using thought communication, barked orders for his pack to attack from all sides, intent on overwhelming the simple wooden defenses. But as the direwolves charged, they were met with something unexpected. Sticky threads, nearly invisible, stretched across their path. The wolves were ensnared, caught in a trap they hadn't anticipated. Frustration and anger welled within the Alpha as he realized he had severely underestimated his opponents. His pack, once so confident, was now tangled and immobilized. But retreat wasn't an option. A retreat would fracture the pack's loyalty and weaken their cohesion, something the Alpha could not afford. With rage in his eyes, the Alpha lunged at the slime, his speed a blur. He aimed to crush this strange creature in one swift strike. But the slime didn't flinch. With a flick of precision, a new sticky thread wrapped around the Alpha, immobilizing him in midair. Water blade. The slime, Rimuru, incanted. When the liquid water surged forth from Rimuru with high concentration and speed, even he was surprised by the raw power he had unleashed. Water blade was one of his first basic spells, but the sheer force of this release was akin to a city-destroying spell. He directed the attack skyward, sparing the forest from the destruction that could have ensued. However, the Alpha was not spared. The Alpha's headless body hit the ground with a sickening thud, his once commanding presence reduced to nothing. Rimuru advanced toward the rest of the pack, who watched in stunned silence. "Submit," he commanded, his voice echoing as he released a sample of his aura. "Or die." Rimuru transformed into a star wolf, his massive form radiating authority. A monstrous howl erupted from his throat, signaling his dominance. Not even the majestic pack could withstand the sheer force of the vibrations from Rimuru's commanding howl. But the display wasn't necessary. Cowed by the swift death of their leader and overwhelmed by Rimuru's power, the remaining direwolves quickly bent the knee, submitting without resistance to their new master. "Our pack yields to you," the wolves said in unison. "Did we win?" one goblin asked in a whisper. "Looks like it," I declared as I transformed back into my slime form. At that moment, the goblin village emerged victorious, celebrating the defeat of the wolves that had been terrorizing them for weeks. As dawn broke over the great Jura forest, the remnants of the previous night's battle became clear. Around 200 goblins and 150 direwolves remained, a significant number, but their survival brought its own set of challenges. It seemed that the direwolves had also increased in number compared to last time, likely for the same reasons as the goblins. Though their population was formidable, they were in dire straits, resources were scarce, and their condition was bordering on destitution. Fortunately, the forest provided ample resources. There was an abundance of wood, food, and water, though the looming threat of a storm weighed on my mind. I knew I could manipulate the weather with weather control if necessary, but for now, our focus had to shift toward securing essential resources: food, water, shelter, and clothing. As the morning sun filtered through the trees, I took charge of organizing the goblins and direwolves, ensuring that every individual was accounted for. Standing beside me was the village elder, Rigurd. Though he had yet to be named, was respected enough that he was able to command the entire population to pay attention to me. And as he was successful in doing that, I began laying rules for our survival. "First, I want all of you to form pairs," I instructed. "Pairs?" they repeated, confused. "Yes, one goblin, one direwolf. I know you've been enemies, but that ends now. We need to cooperate if we're going to survive. Our numbers are an asset, but only if we work together." There was hesitation, but eventually, the goblins and direwolves began to partner up, the tension of their old enmity lingering. Yesterday's foes were today's allies, an uneasy alliance, but a necessary one. "Elder," I called out to Rigurd, who stood quietly by my side. "What is it, Great Rimuru?" he asked. "I want to give all of you names," I said. Rigurd blinked in surprise. "Are you sure? That's a huge responsibility." "Yeah, I don't see any problems with it," I replied, sensing his unease but determined to proceed. As word spread among the goblins, a ripple of excitement coursed through the crowd. The entire population gathered in a nearby clearing, eagerly awaiting their turn to receive a name. "Seal, can we balance the magicule so I don't accidentally create monsters too powerful for the timeline?" I asked inwardly. "Yes, master, I've developed a technique by limiting the energy passed through the open hollow corner bracket soul corridor close hollow corner bracket, I can prevent unnecessary empowerment." Seal responded. I paused to think. I didn't want to bestow overwhelming strength, but I also couldn't leave them defenseless. A balance needed to be struck. Naming monsters requires expending magicules, and the amount transferred to them is proportional to the strength of the name giver. If I wasn't careful, even an ordinary goblin could evolve into a pseudo-catastrophe class being. If they weren't qualified enough, they might succumb to mana poisoning or become lifeless monsters, creating a significant alteration in the timeline, a scenario I wanted to avoid. Thankfully, with Seal Sensei's guidance, I developed a technique we dubbed open hollow corner bracket limit naming close hollow corner bracket which regulated the flow of magicules. This allowed me to give names efficiently without risking destabilization. With Ciel's help, we named the goblins according to their counterparts from the other timeline, while those who didn't survive in the original timeline received new names. It felt odd, seeing how excited they were over the process. I felt bad given that they are stuck with the name I haven't gave much thought. Also, Ranga and his pack was named Ranga and they evolved open hollow corner bracket Tempest Wolf close hollow corner bracket. The names were given, and slowly, a sense of unity began to take hold. Thus, a mini-community was born in a humble goblin village within the Great Jura Forest. Though our progress was incremental, we had laid the foundation for what would one day become a powerful and prosperous nation. But for now, we were not a large nation, we were a large family. To be continued.